Hi everyone, welcome to part 3 of our bite-sized learning series. In this video, we'll be looking at managing groups and what you can and you can't control. So let's have a look at what we'll cover in the video. We'll be looking at external factors, internal factors, so things that you can do, strategies to help, so things that you can implement that will benefit your learners, and a conclusion, obviously. So let's have a look at the external factors that will affect the learning in a group. So things you can't control. So in order to really kind of consider this, you need to think about who we teach. We teach professionals, yeah? We teach people who are normally at work. They are busy, they have lives, and that will mean that they bring a certain amount of stress to work, and therefore they bring that certain amount of stress to class. In this case, we can't really do much about that. We can mitigate the effect that that stress has in the class, but I'll talk about that later. But yeah, so we have to be aware of that, and we have to be empathetic towards our learners because of that. Next one is learners don't do individual work outside of the classroom. Thus, progress is slower, and this has a negative effect on their attitude to class. Look, homework is a bit of a dirty word. If you say homework to someone, they'll be thinking like, why do I need to do more work? I'm not paying to do more work. I am not paid to do the work. A lot of people don't understand because we weren't really taught at school how to learn. We don't really understand the benefit of reusing information. And when I say reusing information, I mean implementing that information on a regular basis. And supporting the learning that we do in one place with further learning outside of that at in our own time. And to be honest, I know plenty of students, and I do this myself, I'm guilty of this sometimes, that I will do my homework 5 minutes before a lesson. And honestly, it's not that beneficial. So just because someone doesn't do homework doesn't mean that those who do homework are saints. You know, people have time to do things when they have it. So we'll look at some ideas for how to change that, the homework question, let's say. The last bit is learners might see English classes as an excuse to get out of work for an hour or so and have a laugh with their friends. So in this case, learning becomes a secondary concern for them. It's important to be aware of people's reasonings for being in the class. If someone has a genuine professional need for the learning, they tend to be better students. They tend to be better learners. They tend to be more engaged. If someone is there for personal reasons, you know, they tend to, like, the need is still there. So they will also be more engaged. In some cases, they don't really need it. You know, there's plenty of cases where you're like, so why are you learning English? Do you get any emails in English? No. Do you get any phone calls in English? No. Do you talk to any colleagues in English? No. So why are you learning English? You know, the need for them isn't there. There is no need. Oh, I want to. Okay. So you need to turn that want into a need, but we'll talk about that again later. So how, like, the things you can control. These are internal factors. These are things that you are responsible for. So how do you interact with your group as individuals? In this regard, like, I mean, how are you addressing people? Do you call them by their names? What's your body language like with them? Do you chide them for not doing their homework? Obviously, all these things can have a positive or a negative effect on your learners and on the group as a whole. It's important to remember that rapport isn't built for a group. Rapport is built up when you have the individuals or more individuals in the group on your side than the others, those who are against you. So there should never be a for and against. Everyone should really enjoy your classes. And in this case, you should be flexible and you should be relaxed with your students as much as possible in order to make them feel comfortable in the classroom. Remember, you're asking them to do something very challenging during a very stressful time of their lives. So make that as comfortable as possible. So anyway, so do you encourage productive behavior? Writing notes and reflecting on what they've learned. I will do another bite-sized learning session on reflection. at a later date because it's so important in the learning process. But writing notes, obviously, when we write things down, we activate our brains in terms of we're doing a physical act, and we're also remembering it in terms of seeing it, and we're hearing it from what the facilitator, ourselves, the teachers, has been saying to them. Are the activities you do linked with what's being covered? This is a harder one because obviously it's important to know and be quite kind of savvy in terms of the context of the language, what you can use the language for, in what cases would they be seeing it in a real world context. So maybe it will be it's things like doing a listening task when you're learning numbers about someone talking about a telephone number, or going to a train station and listening for platform numbers and all that kind of stuff. So these are things that are relevant. Are you meeting their learning needs? So push training versus pull learning. Again, this will be in another entire bite-sized learning thing, and actually it could be 5. It's really important to know about your students' learning needs, and also what push training versus pull learning is. I will talk about this more at length, but it's important to introduce to you now. But yeah, like, you need to be really thinking about like, what are their needs? What do they need? It's I cannot stress, you won't learn if you don't need it, because you're just like, it's not important to me. And the last thing is, can the language learned be immediately implemented, and is it collaborative? So this is information that they can walk out of class with and go, oh, I can use that. And have they done it in a way that everyone in the class has had a positive experience done within working as a group? We don't learn things, especially in groups, as individuals. Yes, there is an individual responsibility within a group to learn something, but usually when we're in a group, we do things together. It's important to maintain this. So let's look at some strategies. There's 4 that can help you maintain a better kind of efficiency and productivity in your class, and getting your learners more involved in the learning process. So the first one I've got is habit forming. And the main thing is actually just, it's small habits, things like making notes. Just keep a list of key language. It forms connections, helps memory. What I would suggest, rather than just writing down a word, I would really suggest getting them to write down a sentence. It's more beneficial when they have something in context than just a word with a translation. Yeah, so they can look at it and they can see, oh, that's what it sounds like in context. So it's really important on that. The other thing you can do, this is entirely on you can do, is spend 2 to 3 minutes at the end of the class to have learners reflect on what they've covered, how they felt about it, and was it easy/hard, and was it what was or wasn't interesting to them. This is really helpful, and something that I'm going to be encouraging a lot of our projects in the future to be looking at, because reflection is super important, and it's very, very powerful in the learning process. We learn through experience and positive emotional connections, or negative emotional connections. It actually is more beneficial than just content. But again, I'll talk about this more at a later date. But that's something that's quick and easy that you can implement, and it will be beneficial in the long run. Next one, individually agreed upon personal projects. So how do I introduce this? Homework is a term used at school, and it has a lot of negative connotations. What you have to remember is that every time we use the word homework, we're taking 2 things, yeah, home and work, and giving them to someone whose work life is already pretty hectic. When you're at school, you don't really have anything in your life aside from school. Okay, yeah, we might have like a little odd job here and there, but for the most part, our life is learning. It's not really learning, it's being educated. It's so when you have to do additional work outside of class, it's work, and that's fine. But these are people who are, they are working all their time anyway. The vast majority of us work a lot, and we are tired from that work. So we see home as the vast majority of time as a safe place. as a place we can go and we can relax and we can unwind. So asking someone to do work at home is pretty negative. So what you need to do is you need to find a need. Okay, now with elementary students, this isn't less so relevant because elementary students need all the language they're getting. Yeah, they need to know the basics. But once you get past that, you need to kind of talk to your students about what they need the language for. What do they enjoy? What do they find interesting? And just get them to start doing that in English. It can be a short thing, it can be an ongoing thing, it can go on for a whole level if you need it to. It doesn't really matter. The main thing is they're using a little bit of their spare time to do something in English, but it can be something that's really fun. So it doesn't need to be fill in these gaps or do this thing or read this text and then write down some answers to these true or false questions. It can just be look at something that's relevant and review it. Other strategies, regular feedback. So this will help with um, in terms of meeting learning needs and getting people engaged and relaxing them from stress. So regular feedback is really key. As you can see, getting your groups comfortable with expressing their feelings about tasks, topics, and challenges. This will help you to be flexible in your approach, and they will be thankful to you for it. Ask them for input. What challenges do they have, which could be solved in the class, and get them to suggest potential topics and tasks for the class to be built around. This is so key, and I cannot stress how many positive experiences I've had in class when someone has said, hey, Tom, I need to have a look at, I need to send an email, to a higher up, and I don't know how to word it properly. Can you have a look? Can you give me some direction? I said, sure. And in the case of this one, actually, I said, okay, let's put it to the class. I said, do all you guys have to do this? And they said, yes. And I said, okay, would you like a template to be able to be used in the future? And they were like, yeah, that sounds amazing. I said, okay, let's brainstorm how we would do it. So all of a sudden, we weren't just using one structure for the lesson. We were looking at, polite, impolite, formal, informal greetings, structure in writing, punctuation, wording, different range of vocabulary, sign-on, sign-offs, passive voice, all of these things that can be done in one thing because the context is set and the context is really beneficial for them. So they learned it and they end up with something that really helpful and really beneficial to them afterwards. So these things are really, really important, and getting that regular feedback from your students is super helpful. So if someone is stressed at work and you say, can I help? Is there something we can do in class that will help? Yeah, okay, most of the time it will probably be no, I have to handle it myself. In some cases, it might be a simple yes. And the last thing is to shift from teacher to facilitator. So all members of your groups and yourself are professionals, yeah? You're considered an authority in your professional area, the English language. So they will expect you to be professional about that. They come for you to facilitate their learning. You shouldn't call yourself a teacher. And I know it's going to be really hard to get out of because it's really easy to refer to yourself a teacher and to your students as students. But they abdicate individual responsibility when they become a student. All of that pressure becomes on you. Yeah. Like you are responsible entirely for their learning because that's what happens at school. Yeah. You come along, you teach content and they have to remember that content. And then you have to get them to regurgitate that content in an exam and then they pass. There is at no point in that learning is practical done tasks. Yes, weirdly abstract tangential things might be, but for the most part, how we teach is not beneficial to actual productive learning. So I'm slowly trying to get away from using it myself, but it's a hard thing to do because I'm so used to calling myself a teacher. But we should not consider ourselves teachers, we should consider ourselves facilitators. Again, this will be another bite-sized learning session, so I won't go into it too much. But it's very important that we consider this and we think about this very carefully about how our students are learning and what they're learning and is it helpful. So, in conclusion, being organized is really good and having a plan for the lesson, especially desired outcomes, is key. At the end of the day, you want your students to be able to do something at the end of a lesson. Yeah, how they get around to doing it is another matter. That's the key thing. However, being overly stuck on the lesson plan makes it less about the learners and mostly about you. And I cannot stress this enough. At the end of the day, if you think about what we're doing, we are given a huge bulk of content, and there is so much pressure on us to make sure that our learners can regurgitate that content. Is it beneficial? Again, we'll talk about this more, but that is something really to think about. So, we want our learners to become confident communicators using English, and this does not happen unless we have them on board for the journey, and strict itineraries make for terrible journeys. Overall, be flexible, be thoughtful, be mindful, and be ready to adapt when you need to in order to meet the needs and demands of your students, in order to give them the most productive, beneficial learning experience they can get, and they leave feeling positive and that your learning that the learning that's been done in the classroom has been effective. Okay, thank you very much, and I will see you next week.